Today we're going to paint some blue goo. This was some lotion I had and I put it in a jar. I loved the color, so let's get started. Alright, so we're painting blue goo. This is some lotion that I had which is for burns, and it is just such a great color. It's an artificial color. It's not a color you see in nature here, but I thought it might be fun to try to paint that artificial color because I don't have a color on my palette that's going to be the same, so I'm going to have to mix it. So the first thing I do is take Naples yellow, water it down, and I'm putting that in places where most people would put masking fluid or some sort of white out. But I don't like to do that because when I put it on, it's always messy, and when you go to lift it up, it always looks like a scar or some sort of band-aid. But I need a placeholder, otherwise I'm going to just run right over those areas. So this is going to remind me it's just slightly off white, which is what the masking fluid looks like, frankly, when you put it on. The next thing I do is I take Naples yellow, permanent rose, and a cerulean blue, and I'm going to mix a warm gray. I need this gray because I'm going to key all the rest of my values off of this gray. I know that the background is darker in the picture than it appears to be, so I'm going to make everything lighter. I want everything in this painting to be a value of, well, this is probably a value of 2 that's going in right now with that gray, and I'm hoping to get into 3, 3.5, or 4 at the very most. I hope I don't go down to 5. That's my goal. But we'll see what happens. I don't exactly remember what happened. I did this a few days ago and promised somebody that I would put it up as a tutorial, and now I have to talk it through, and I'm not sure that I remember. You can see the palette cam on the left-hand side, and I always like to say, here's some gray going in, same mixture, but a little bit more blue in it, so it's darker. It's a darker blue than that background, darker gray, excuse me, than that background was. In order to make it darker, I have to change the temperature. To change the temperature, I add a little bit of blue in it. That's going to make it a little bit cooler. Well, I forgot the other thing I was going to say. I knew that would happen. But we'll continue on. The next thing that I seem to be doing is, it looks like I'm trying to figure out what that artificial color is. Yeah, I am. It seems to be some sort of turquoise, some cerulean blue is in it, and probably a little bit of ultramarine blue as well. I'm not sure. Now, I want to make this the most vivid color in the whole painting. And by vivid, I mean the most saturated, with no gray in it at all. Because if I make everything else slightly grayed down and then don't gray down this color, it'll have more impact. So that's my goal. And I'm squinting now and thinking that might be a value of 4. So I hope I don't go a whole lot darker than that, but I'm not sure what's going to happen. Oh, I remember the thing that I wanted to say. I'm also compensating for the fact that in photographs, the shadows are always darker than they are in real life. So I have this object in real life in the same place where I photographed it. So I'm referring to that as well. So I have about 3 different things going on that I'm thinking about at the same time. But I've gotten used to that. That's kind of normal around here. There I see I'm putting some ultramarine blue into that artificial turquoise or whatever it is. I don't know. Such an unusual color for me, and yet it's probably a color you would see, in the Bahamas or someplace like that. But you're not going to see that color in Vermont, that's for sure. I should also say, this is a small painting. It's only 8 by 8 inches. It's on an arch block of cold pressed paper, and the paintbrush I'm using, it looks to me to be 1 inch wide. I think that's how wide this flat is. I used to always paint with rounds, but lately I've been using flats. No explanation for why. I just seem to have gravitated toward that. So there's some, I wish, you can't quite see underneath the photograph. There's a little bit of color inside that shadow which travels underneath the glass jar. I also should say this is probably speeded up to about 4 times as fast as I usually paint. I think this painting took about 35 minutes or something. Yeah, 35 minutes or something. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to find the dark elements. Now they're not dark. They're relatively dark. You know, as soon as you start painting, everything is just relative to whatever everything else is in the painting. So this is an even darker gray going in. It's darker than the background, and it's darker than those few spots that I put in inside the jar. And I'm squinting my eyes right now. I think it's the exact same value as the blue that I put in. By blue, by value, I mean lightness or darkness. Oh, I also remember the other thing I forgot to say. If you want to speed this video up or slow it down and you're watching it on YouTube, you can touch the screen and you'll get 3 dots that appear on the upper right-hand side, and you can manipulate how fast or slow you want this to be. I know there are dogs barking, and I've tried to do this several times and not have them barking, and there's no way that I'm going to stop and try this again because I just can't handle the barking issue. So I apologize for the barking in the background. We're just going to go on. This is real life. This is what happens. And yeah. So, all right. So now looking through the jar, there's always going to be a little bit of grayness in certain areas because of the background. And because there is, even though the glass itself is invisible, you're looking through 2 layers of glass here. And that in itself can create some gray shapes. So I'm very carefully looking at those shapes, but trying not to run over any of the places I put in as Naples yellow, which are my placeholders for what is going to appear to be white at the very end. So it's mostly a composition of gray with some artificial blue goo, as I call it, in the bottom, because it wasn't a liquid, it was more like a gel that's in there. And now I'm going to work on the top of the jam jar. It was some sort of empty jam or jelly jar. And I just liked, you know, something that happens a lot, I think, is have some things around your studio that are kind of compelling to you. And you'll look at them at different times and suddenly they'll speak to you. And I saw this out of the corner of my eye, and I just thought, oh, I just love the red stripes and I love the blue. And I thought, I haven't seen something like this done recently. You know, some things become cliche when you do them over and over and over again. You know, like, let's say a red barn or, oh, I don't know, sunflowers. Some things just become cliches. And I find sometimes if I'm painting something that's kind of a cliche, I'm just not as invested in it. I'm not giving it the same energy that I would if I was kind of paying attention to something for me might feel more like the first time. Now it's darker on that right-hand side of the lid, so I had to mix paint that was darker, that that red is just slightly darker than the red that I put in the other places of the lid, because the jar has a little bit of shadow on that side. But nothing is very dramatic. You know, that's the whole point of this, is painting glass, and for me, painting in general right now, is they're just very small gradations between color and value. And as much as I can, I'm trying to use temperature. There's an example of temperature where I added some yellow to the red in order to warm it up so it's lighter in terms of, is it lighter? I'm squinting my eyes right now. It's slightly lighter, but not much. We're not even talking about a step lighter. We're talking about maybe like a quarter of a step lighter. It's just not what I'm accustomed to in terms of like value shape painting, where I can clearly see the value differences. I'm really looking at the difference in temperature here more than value, because like I said, this painting in general is probably values 1 through, right now I'm squinting and saying probably values 1 through 4. But I know at the very end I go back in and do make a couple of dark signature shapes inside the gel, because I had the color of the gel, but I didn't have the shape of the gel until I put those in. And you'll see them appear at the very end. I don't think I videoed them, but I did video the final result. And that's reflective of, you know, oftentimes when you paint something and you walk away and you think you're done, and then you look at it, you know, half an hour later and it doesn't quite deliver what you hoped it did. And so you have to go back. So that's not unusual at all. What's unusual is that I didn't set up and record it with the camera. But I will explain and show the difference. So this is looking pretty liquidy right now. And wonder if I pull that blue shape out a little bit more. I can't, I just don't remember. Oh, and the other thing I wanted to just sort of have you pay attention to is see how little, well, look at the palette and you'll see that I don't let my colors run into each other. You know, I keep them really separate. If you let your colors, if you get messy on the palette and let colors move into each other or join each other, you're going to end up, they'll neutralize each other. As soon as that red hits any of that orange, it's going to turn into gray. And before you know it, if you're not careful keeping your colors separate and then cleaning your palette when you're ready to take a break and start back in again, you'll end up, not meaning to, but you'll end up adding gray to what you're painting. And the result is an overall gray in your painting that you don't want. And that's really important in painting glass, because I want all the painting of the gray that I paint to be deliberate. I don't want it to sort of neutralize itself on its own. So there's a very light gray, light and warm. So that would be the same gray that I mixed up at the beginning, which would be Naples yellow, permanent rose, and cerulean blue, but with a lot of Naples yellow in it. And it's warmer because you can see that there's yellow in it. And that's what went in the paper, both behind and as you can see through the glass. So as I'm doing this, I'm squinting a lot. I'm squinting an awful lot because I just am looking for any place that there's a value or a temperature change in some way. And like I said, very few value changes. So I'm really relying on temperature. So I'm asking myself, how warm is that? How cool is that? And then saying to myself, how does that compare to the background? Everything is in comparison to everything else. There was a little bit of a refraction of the red of the top of the jar at the very bottom, where the bottom meets the table. Looking for those slight, very slight color shifts and differences. I like it that glass doesn't exactly make sense. And so you just have to paint what you see, not, you know, as always, not what you think you see. Oh, the other thing I wanted to say though, but it's also important to have your setup, like you can see the setup slightly in the photograph that I have there, which is, it's not one light source in that photograph. I have a spotlight on the thing, but I don't have it in a box so that there's no other light sources. I'm finding it interesting and challenging and important for me right now to paint things that come from, that always have a variety of light sources, because that's really how the world is. It's very seldom that you see something that's in a spotlight. And I want to see if I can capture the light, not just when it's controlled and in a box, you know, like a shadow box you might make for painting, but I want to see, can I control and figure out light when it comes from multiple sources? That's just a source of fascination for me. So I like how saturated that blue is. That's definitely working out. So I'm going to pull some of that out a little bit into the shadow, and I'm not sure what happens next. Like I said, I did this several days ago and promised someone that I would put it up as a tutorial, so I'm really late in doing this, and typically I'm not sure I really remember the process, but you know, to some degree, it's always the same. No matter what you do, it's kind of always the same. Oh boy, that just got quite a bit darker. Ooh, that's probably a value of 5. That's interesting. Well, I'm going to go with my painter's instinct. You know what happened probably about this time, when you paint for a while, you start seeing more things and you start feeling a little bit more confident about what you see. And I must have seen very clearly that it was darker and I needed to show that. So I did. And I have to admit, if I hadn't done that, I don't know that the glass would seem as rounded as it appears, as opposed to flat. So at this point, I really felt like I had gotten the jar done, and I must be off either cleaning the palette or mixing paint. I'm not sure, but what's interesting to me is usually I'm making all these value dabs, which would appear on that card there above the photograph, and I didn't make any value dabs. Okay, here's the final piece. Yeah, I like the final piece. I came in and put in a couple of dark spots inside the gel, but they're no darker than the darkest spot that I put in previously, that gray, which worked out pretty well. So as always, remember to keep the white to your paper white, your paints wet, mass for value, mix for color. Please join my YouTube channel, and I'll see you next time. Okay, bye-bye.